Patchwork Heart Ministry and Fiat Ministry Network invite you to discover your mission. A brand new in-depth monthly video series featuring engaging Catholic speakers who will challenge you to live your life abundantly. For only $25 a month, you will receive a personal monthly mission, including 3 full-length inspirational talks that build upon a new theme each month. Sign up for the Discover Your Mission tier at patreon.com/patchworkheartministry today.
Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is a show all about implanting hope in our hearts. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. We're glad you're here for our uplifting conversation about faith and how it sustains our hearts through all the seasons of life. Thanks for walking with us. And good evening, everybody, and welcome to the evening edition of Sowing Hope. I am Bill Snyder, and I am always blessed to be joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. It is just a pleasure to have you joining us, no matter where you are listening here, whether it's YouTube, Podbean. Thank you for joining us, and welcome, Ann. It's great to have you with me tonight.
Hey, Bill. Great to be here on this evening, beautiful May evening, with a fabulous guest that I'm excited for us to have a conversation with.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us.
Yeah, his name is Jeff Wallace. So welcome, Jeff. Thank you for joining us on the Sowing Hope podcast. And I would tell our listeners that Jeff is the director of campus ministry at a nearby college near where I'm located in the greater Philadelphia area, Gwynedd-Mercy University. And it is my alma mater, so I do feel very strongly that it is a wonderful university. And my daughter is also a student there, so that's how I know Jeff, and he's doing fabulous work, especially during this pandemic. The university continues to make outreach to students through their campus ministry, through weekly prayer meetings. So I'm very impressed by that and impressed by all the great work that you're doing, Jeff. So thank you for joining us on this podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bill and Ann. It's a pleasure to be here. To be honest, this is the first time I've ever been on a podcast. So I'm just geeking out because I love this type of stuff. So happy to be here. Happy to be part of this podcast. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
I know you'd be a great guest. Yeah.
We hope it's many. We hope there's many more podcasts in your future.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Well, we'll see if the Lord allows. If the Lord allows.
There you go.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's all about faith. And Jeff, I know you have a deep faith. You and I have shared daily mass weekly mass, I should call it, over at Gwynedd-Mercy University, where on Mondays, the university offers a mass at 11:30. And I'm so blessed to be a part of that because receiving the Eucharist and being a part of community is very important, both to me and my daughter, who is also a student at Gwynedd-Mercy, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, you have done so much even before working at Gwynedd-Mercy. I know that your wife, Chelsea, and you have a little son, Daniel.
We do.
So let's start there. Start there.
Right. Daniel is 11 months old. He is currently what Nickelodeon called the Rugrat. He's a Rugrat right now. And he's just crawling all over the place, all over our floors, all over our house, really. We live in Havertown, Pennsylvania. And, it's amazing. And just the whole process of becoming a parent and bringing life into this world. And, I won't get into the details, but suffice to say that just being with Chelsea, she was giving birth to our son Daniel, was probably the closest thing to a miracle I'll ever witness. It's just it really helps me reflect on how precious life is and how blessed how blessed I think Chelsea and I are, and our families are, and how blessed our relationship is, because just everything. There's so many things, right? So many things that could happen, so many things that could go wrong, but with God's help and prayer and God's grace, I think everything went right, and that I think can be so rare sometimes, and so I think, just looking at him every day now that I have the time, and now I'm home all the time working remotely thanks to Gwynedd, and being able to see him develop and grow is just one of the biggest blessings I have right now in my life. So I could go on. I don't want to go on.
So beautiful. No,
I totally
beautiful.
understand. Yeah, it's an amazing time of your life when you have that first child, and so I'm happy for you and Chelsea, and say hi to Daniel, and
yes,
and the next couple years is going to be a lot of fun for you guys.
Yeah, I've heard fun. I've heard a lot of other words too. But
yeah, there's sacrifice there too, but it's all part of it, and you're building some awesome memories that you'll never ever forget. And how blessed is little Daniel that Dad has a faith and really celebrates the Catholic faith, because we know that that's where we get our strength, right? I mean, it's from our faith. And
for sure.
I'm very grateful to you, Jeff, and to the people at Gwynedd-Mercy, because my daughter, I mean, even though she's not a baby anymore, right? When you send your kid off to college, you want them to go to a place where there is going to be the celebration of their faith, and be able to find that in the community, wherever you decide, whether it's a private institution or a public institution. Having a campus ministry office like yourself, what you do at Gwynedd, is so important to the lives of those students who do want to celebrate their Catholic faith, or whatever faith they're celebrating. I mean, whether it be Christian or another area of faith and honoring God.
Yeah, there's a lot in all that you said. I think for my part, talking about celebrating my own Catholic faith and infusing that in our life here with Chelsea and Daniel, reminds me of I was seeing a spiritual director for a while, and unfortunately, because of time and the pandemic now, I haven't seen him recently. His name is Father Ray Donaldson. He's a Jesuit down at the Jesu School in Northeast Philadelphia. And prior to Chelsea giving birth to Daniel, we were talking, and I was telling him I was feeling all these things and feeling all these movements, and he just said to me straight out, Jeff, what you're about to experience after Chelsea, after you have your son, is what in the gospel they talk about the abundance of life. What you're about to experience is that, and that has stuck with me since then. Through everything, including the pandemic. I think when the gospel says that, and when the Bible kind of talks about the abundance of life, I think we can focus a lot on the positives, the blessings, and all of that. But part of that abundance sometimes is really about entirety. It's about the entireness of life, and all of the great stuff, but all of the challenges too, and all the things that really make life what it is. And so I can say that kind of celebrating the Catholic faith in the way they phrased it is by acknowledging God's presence in the presence of Christ in all of that, whether it is the good, the birth of my son, all the blessings we've had since then, or within the challenge, time of pandemic, everything else that's happening in the world today. So I think that phrase, and it came up when your intro was happening, Bill, the abundance of life. And so that's what I reflect on when you're talking about celebrating the Catholic faith. And I think to your second part regarding Sean, your daughter, first of all, Sean's great. I don't know if Sean's listening, but
she probably is.
Great. Sean, you're great. Really appreciate having Sean. And, and truthfully, all of the students who participate with campus ministry at Gwynedd. But one thing I just wanted to mention, you brought up kind of celebrating the Catholic faith or other faiths. And I think at Gwynedd, we definitely draw from a variety of different faith backgrounds. or no faith background. And so what that necessitates in our ministry as campus ministers at Gwynedd is really an approach of encounter. And so meeting our students where they are, and walking with them, accompaniment, really focused on Pope Francis's model of ministry right now, and kind of what he's been bringing to the forefront of Catholic practice. And I think what connected with that, I've been listening to Pope Francis recently, really trying to hearken us back to that encounter with Christ. Faith being a lot about that encounter, that individual personal encounter with Christ. And I think it can be easy to discount students or young people or young adults because they might say things here and there. Oh, I don't know, like faith, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if I believe in it or agree with it. And I think our approach in Gwynedd is really just to allow them to be here, walk through our door, be able to have tough conversations, ask great questions, and really just offer our own responses. For me, from my faith as a Catholic, and invite them to dialogue. I think that you talk about the old school phrase that's used is the pastoral care of souls, right? And in order for me to feel like I'm being a minister and I'm living out that call, or that, what the right word for it is, within my vocation, say, in order for me to feel like I'm doing that with integrity, I have to be the one to be really welcoming people, inviting them in to encounter, and walking with them in that, and accompanying them so that they might be able to find and develop their own spirituality, their faith. And in some ways, what I found in that approach is it will lead some students to want to inquire more about being Catholic and come to the faith that way. And for others, it doesn't. But the way I look at that is, it's always important to plant seeds, right? It's always important to plant seeds in some soil. And in some ways, that's all I can do as a minister. And only people's lives will tell whether or not they're able to water those seeds and allow that faith to grow.
Yeah. Jeff, I think you may bring up some really good points about ministry in today's world, especially in colleges. You know it better than we do, but what I do think is that I think a lot of young people today out there in the world are at that level, in the collegiate level anyway. They are searching now to own their own faith. I was a high school youth minister for 15 years, at different parishes, maybe not quite 15, but 10 or 12. And I'll tell you, the level at which I watch kids have an ownership of their faith in high school was probably not existent. When I was in high school, growing up out that way in Paoli, Pennsylvania, at St. Norbert's Parish, I'm going to own my own faith. There was an aspect of that in high school, but I think in today's world, with the rapid pace of technology, parents were pushing their kids more and more to get confirmed in high school or whatever, and they weren't owning their faith. They weren't exploring it. They weren't talking about it. I think more and more that is happening at the collegiate level now. And you're watching almost an adolescent faith have to mature at the collegiate level, and it's very interesting. And so I just am curious to know from you how that looks. How do people show up at campus ministry? What are the ways that they come to you? Are they coming through their friends? Are they coming through others? Are they curious on their own? How do they arrive at your campus ministry office?
That's a great question. And I think I'll start by kind of backing up a little bit. And I don't know if you've read this, Bill or Anne, and I think Anne, in a prior conversation, I've mentioned it to you, but there's a really interesting study that was done by St. Mary's Press. It was a study called Going, Going, Gone. And what the study tried to focus on was, and learn, really, the object of it was to try and understand why young people decided not to be Catholic anymore. Like when did they decide that, and why did they decide that? One of the most startling parts of that study was that there are some young people as young as 13 who decided that they weren't going to be Catholic anymore, which is, as you were saying, maybe going through confirmation, and they didn't really want to do it. Their parents made them do it. And so by the age of 13, they're making these decisions. And the two questions that really stuck, I read through kind of a St. Mary's Press publishes summary of that study in a very thin book. But the two questions that stuck with me from there were really kind of at the beginning of that small book, kind of summarizing, we've done all this data, we have all this data, and really what we believe it comes down to for a lot of our people we interviewed are two things. One, a lot of times when young people would leave the church, and what they would say was the reason why they left was, one, they didn't really know my name or my story, one reason. Mm-hmm. The second reason was, I didn't feel like if I left, anybody would care. Nobody would know that I was gone, was the way I think it was phrased. And, as a minister, it struck me because, when a lot of the reason why I got into ministry was because I had a really deep experience of, a relationship with God and Christ and the Catholic faith from a very young age in high school, similar to what you're talking about, Bill. And so I wanted to continue that and really help students to arrive at that relationship with Christ, or if they're not Christian or Catholic, arrive at that relationship within their own religion. And, I think within the Catholic context specifically, there are a lot of young people who might feel alienated, unfortunately. And so when you talk about how do students arrive at our office, it's a lot of varying degrees. You have some students like Sean who are very active in their faith, who go to Mass frequently, who sing at Mass, and who really know and love their Catholic faith. Conversely, you have a lot of students who walk through our doors really for a myriad of reasons. We have some great staff. My staff, the staff that I work with, Michelle France and Betsy Stone Plummer. Betsy runs our service opportunity to campus ministry of alternative breaks. And then Michelle France really runs our spiritual programming. And so each of those two, my colleagues, they have a relationship with students, and those students come to speak with them, about programming. Yeah. But sometimes it goes deeper. Sometimes it becomes about faith, and it becomes about purpose, and it becomes about what drives them. And so I think it's really a crapshoot. If you Gwynedd-Mercy University, our office is kind of tucked away in the back, but it's actually the oldest edifice on campus. It's over 200 years old, and it houses a variety of different people. But our policy is, open doors, all are welcome. I actually had a student, I was talking with her, and she started sharing with me about her faith, and she was a Pentecostal evangelical Christian. And I was talking about how we really try and foster interfaith relationships and all of that. And she was very blunt with me, said, you don't have to do that. You just proclaim your faith, proclaim the Christian faith, and be strong in that. You don't have to water it down. And so that was an interesting experience for me, and really to listen to her and encounter her there. Mm-hmm. Because, I do feel like I'm pretty strong in my Catholic faith, but to others, it might not seem that way. And so it was a moment of reflection and kind of realizing that as many students as we do have who may seem uninterested or disengaged, we have maybe a few or even a little more students than we think who are very engaged in their faith. And so our job is to really figure out how to engage a variety of different faith backgrounds.
Yeah,
I think you do a
absolutely.
great job with that, honestly, just
Thank
from
you.
my daughter's perspective.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think part of and I say all these things, and just for your listeners out there, I wouldn't consider myself an expert. I certainly been, working in campus ministry for 4 years. I was 3 years at a prior institution, and now I'm director. This is my first year as a director of campus ministry. So this is a lot of me learning as I'm going. But one thing I perceive, and one thing that helps us out a lot, I think, is really finding what students are interested in. And this is a little bit more higher education than it is ministry, but I think it ties in. Sean is interested in her faith, and she's also interested in liturgical arts. And so I play guitar. I've been doing liturgical arts for a very long time. And so whenever we have masses, whenever we have prayer services, Sean's somebody we talk to. Hey, Sean, would you be interested in playing music with us? Oh, yeah, I'd love to do that. So in some ways we're kind of stacking the deck because we know that Sean's already interested in that. But with all of our students, it's good for us to learn, what are they interested in, and how can we invite them to share their gifts with us in the programming that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Empowering students to live their faith and use their talents and gifts for the church. It's so important. I think a big piece of what you're saying there too is, meeting them where they are on their faith journey is very important too. And I think when you take where they are in their journey, and also the talents and gifts that they have, and realize that you can use them for the glory of God, right? When you can use them for the glory of God, that the church becomes them. And it becomes a little less, a lot of times I heard in high school youth ministry, man, this stuff is just so boring, and I would, shoot back at them. It's because, kind of jokingly, but also a little bit harsh. I say, because you are,
Yeah.
because, I said, the church is you, and it doesn't have to be boring,
Right.
I mean, and so I think that, you by engaging people and having them bring their gifts and their talents and their time into the church, you would be able to help them grow in their own faith, because they're realizing and empowering that this faith that they have is they're actually part of something larger. I
Yes.
think that's what young people want. They're part of something larger, and so kudos to you for taking that and building upon that, their interests in that stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I always find myself trying to be reminded that it's all God, right? Like, it's all God working in people's lives. And what is it? Let me see if I can remember this in my sacraments class from divinity school. When people are ordained, when priests and deacons are ordained, was it continue the good work that God has already started in you? And I think of that when we work with these students and they feel inspired and want to get involved. And most, I think it's easiest, and it's not most, but easiest to see that through service. I think a lot of times, and I know I was certainly this way when I was in high school, really service is what brought me into the faith, and social action, social justice, really, and Catholic social teaching. That's what really brought me to this point. And I think that it's so effective because it's, like you were saying, Bill, it's about showing young people in higher education, to call them emerging adults, which,
Yes,
I don't know
I've heard
how I
that
feel
before.
about that.
Yeah,
It's a good phrase, but it's like,
Right.
they're students, they're young people. Anyway, so in that, when they're engaged in service, they can see, one, they're making a tangible difference, but two, especially if the reflection is done right, and we do a pretty good job at reflecting over at Gwynedd, they understand, look, I'm part of this larger fabric of the world. I'm part of this larger fabric of the church, of faith. And the way in which I live that out in service or other ways is going to connect me with others and make us, make me part of this large thing. In Catholic speak, we call it the common good, right? So
Yeah.
I am operating within the common good. And by doing this service, I'm taking part in making a difference in that. One thing we're working on in our ministry right now is really trying to be intentional about the ways that we link our service to our spiritual programming, like masses, and vice versa. Because I think it's important for students to see that the reason why we do service is because of our commitment to faith, the Catholic faith, and the example of Christ in the Gospels, who invited everyone to really, invited the Israelite community of the time to really repair community by inviting all people back into that community, the unclean, the widows, the migrant, everybody comes together. And so it's out of faith rather than just doing service for service sake. Also, when you do a retreat, you're participating in that same thing. It's all one. It's a both and. And that's something we're really trying to figure out as years to come, is how do we help students understand that when they're doing service, or they're going on a retreat, or they're doing mass, or they're singing, or they're participating in a monthly dinner that we have, open house, that's all contributing to this wonderful reign that Christ talked about in the Gospels, the reign of God.
Yeah. I always talk about it too. The exactly what you just said, the empty service, we can serve emptily, or we can serve because it's what Christ commissions us to do. Mm-hmm. And what a beautiful way that you're, again, trying to, help them realize that, because I can go out and donate my time to, whatever social organization. I can go over to the food pantry right now, and I can sit there and hand out food and help my fellow man during this crisis, which, we should do. But if I'm doing that because it's the right thing to do, I'm missing the point. If I'm doing it because I am seeking to become another Christ in the world and serve others and live like him, then I'm getting the point. You know what I mean? So I think for you to really drive that home, that this is not just a service because I need to meet my service hour requirement for National Honor Society, or whatever you're in. A lot of times, even in colleges, I remember there was service requirements for certain classes and for certain areas of study that I would go into, and I'm like, yeah, but why do I need to have service requirement? Like, isn't that what I'm supposed to be doing as a Catholic? You know what I mean? So helping people realize that and recognize that and bring that to life, that's totally beautiful. Totally beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. What I love a lot of what I'm hearing, so much of it, Jeff. So thank you for the great work. And for those who are listening, we're with Jeff Wallace. He's the director of campus ministry at Gwynedd-Mercy University. It is my own alma mater, and you can learn more about them at gmercyu.edu, I think, isn't it? gmercyu.edu.
Yes.
And I invite people to check that out on your phone or your laptop and learn more about them, and make sure that you put in the search engine campus ministry, right? Mm-hmm. So that you can learn more about Jeff Wallace and the other people that he works with to bring the love of God to all the students there. Because as you said, Jeff, some of the students, you do have a handful of, Catholic students who are really wanting to be engaged in their faith. And then you have a lot of other students these days who, they want something of faith, but they just maybe not sure what it is. Mm-hmm. And they come to your door wanting a little bit more of that. Yeah. But you're sort of an open door to say, we're going to meet you where you are. Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of it is meeting people where they are, introducing them to the love of God. Mm-hmm. And, maybe the catechesis piece of it will come. But I always say on other podcasts, because sometimes as Catholics, we can get really caught up in wanting people to make sure that they have that education in our faith, which is so deeply important. But a big part of catechesis, even for us who are very well catechized, is to remember that we do have to make outreach to those in need and those who are marginalized, and social justice issues. Because I do think sometimes we can forget about that, some of us, because we get comfortable with our church friends or people that we feel comfortable with, but then we kind of forget that there's a lot of people that are suffering. Right now we're in this COVID-19 crisis. There are a lot of people who are suffering, some that have the disease and some people who've lost jobs. So I commend you, Jeff, for being able to recognize how important it is to teach kids. When I say kids, I should say emerging adults, right? Emerging adults, how important it is to make that social outreach to those who are on the fringes.
That it's a challenge, with everything out there with the CDC and all the guidelines. I think the idea is closeness. You want, in an ideal situation, you want students to experience, what the world is like. I think sometimes, like you were saying, we kind of get lulled into this comfort that, this is the way the world is. I have my picket fence and I have my lawn and I have my child, and that's it. What else is there? And I think what the Catholic faith, and frankly, in what I've studied, what the gospel really challenges us to do is really to encounter, right? Going back to that word, I feel like I've been saying that a lot. Who are the people in the community who are pushed aside, and how are we trying to reflect that love of God to them, like you were saying? How are we trying to invite them back in? And with something like an alternative break, I think, alternative break program at Gwynedd-Mercy, we send students to 4 different locations. This year, we were able to send them to Laredo, Texas, to work on the border. We sent them to Baltimore, Maryland. We sent them to, let me see if I can do this. I think I can. I know I can. Give me a second. Laredo, Texas, Baltimore, Maryland. We had an interfaith one in Philadelphia, and then Cincinnati, Ohio. And so each of those different locations had students encounter others, in different situations, situations of poverty, situations that, run-of-the-mill Gwynedd students might not necessarily experience. Although compared to other universities in the area, I will say that I think there are some Gwynedd students who do experience food insecurity, hunger insecurity, food insecurity, home insecurity, excuse me. Well, let's put that to the side. So, when they're going on alternative break, they're really trying to enact what Christ is inviting, I think, all Catholics and all people of faith to do, which is to build a relationship, encounter others, to really understand that God's love is so expansive and so large that there is no us, them, there is no barriers. There's only us. There's only together. Father Greg Boyle, who's a Jesuit who founded Homeboy Industries out in Los Angeles, and Homeboy Industries is a organization that for many years now has been bringing gang members back into the workforce, and really giving people new leases on life. Father Greg always talks about the idea of kinship and being led by those on the margins, such that the margins are erased and we no longer become us and them, we just become us. And I think when we send a student out on alternative break, that's what we're attempting to do, this to show them, look, this person might be in Cincinnati or this person might be in Laredo, Texas, but we're human. We all operate together, and our responsibility is to work with those who are struggling, who are impoverished, who are challenged by society. As St. Augustine talked about back in the 5th century or 4th century, you're talking about, do you have an extra cloak on your back? Good, give it to somebody who's poor. That type of understanding that's so deeply rooted within, I think, the Catholic faith.
It is. I'm so blessed, and I know, Bill, you are too, because Bill, you and I do agree on this piece of our faith, that making outreach to those who do feel away from their faith, who do feel marginalized, who do feel left out, is so important for all of us to recognize as people of faith. So people who are listening, I invite you to connect with us at Sowing Hope Podcast, but also with Jeff Wallace at Gwynedd-Mercy University. And also, if you have a son or daughter, or you yourself are considering a university, I would highly recommend it. I am a graduate of Gwynedd, and so is my husband. And also my daughter is a junior there. So what a blessing to us that we're connected with you and with the university. Because, that word mercy, I think, is just so important. Yeah. And you mentioned Pope Francis. And I mean, I love Pope Francis. And I do think that he's been up against a lot, especially with this pandemic recently, and in Rome and in Italy, and now here, and everything that's happened in the church. Yeah. On another note too, Jeff, I wanted to make sure we just touched on the fact that Gwynedd has done such an awesome job with making outreach during this pandemic. So maybe you could share with us what that's been like and what the school has been doing to make that outreach to students in a prayerful way.
No, it's great. So, just maybe just to start with the word mercy, because I think at Gwynedd and just in general, when you work in an institution that's affiliated with the Sisters of Mercy, it's a very specific thing. So the Sisters of Mercy founded our school in 1948. Sisters of Mercy were founded in Ireland in the 19th century by Catherine Macaulay, who's venerable. And whoever's listening to this, if you're better in terms of categories, I think she's in the venerable category. So she's on her way to sainthood. But Catherine Macaulay back in Ireland was a Catholic at a time when Catholics were not major parts of Irish society, which seems weird to understand now. But at the time, it was really very Protestant, and Catherine Macaulay just continued to believe in her Catholic faith. And, she founded this amazing group of women, the Sisters of Mercy, who are very focused on, as we were talking about, kind of making outreach to those who feel marginalized, those who feel vulnerable. And so our university at Gwynedd-Mercy is really focused on that. The students we work with, the issues that we care about, the ways in which we interact with others. We really are trying to put our mercy first. We want to live our mission of mercy such that all can feel welcome and part of care and mercy. And so when it comes to student outreach, I think it kind of mentioned earlier, just Gwynedd students experiencing food insecurity and housing insecurity. Unfortunately, for all college students in general, in recent years, a lot more have been struggling with food insecurity and housing insecurity, a rising cost of college, rising cost of living, rising cost of food, and college students not being able to make ends meet. And so one thing that was started well before I started at Gwynedd-Mercy was something called Catherine's Cupboard. And Catherine's Cupboard is a food pantry on campus where students can come and make themselves bags of food with all sorts of different essentials. Right now, it's a lot of canned goods, but we do have a pretty high use of it. A lot of students come and use it. And apart from that, we also have grab-and-go stations in Catherine's Cupboard. And so around campus, students who are on the go, who might need something before class, can stop by these two grab-and-go locations on their way to class and just get some food for the road. And I think, obviously there's the faith piece of that, and trying to give to people who feel vulnerable. But then there's also a very practical piece of that in higher education where there's a lot of ink being spilled, a lot of studies being done about connecting the, food needs with academic success. If you're hungry during class, if you're hungry when you're trying to study, odds are you're probably not going to be focusing on the thing you're studying with, or the thing you're studying, period. That might lead you to getting not as good of grades as you might want. And so really what's underpinning our outreach is this idea that if we can give these students their basic needs with food, then they will be able to succeed in school. Now, unfortunately, during the pandemic, our campus has been closed to anyone outside of very specific people. So for the beginning part of the pandemic, we weren't able to get that food off campus. But fortunately, Betsy Stone Plummer, Jim Gallo, who's the vice president of mission integration, which is the vision that campus ministry operates in, they were able to work with an organization in Philadelphia called Project Home, which is an organization founded by Sister Mary Scullion, Sister of Mercy, that works with people who are homeless in Philadelphia. And we were able to take a lot of our food stock from the cupboard and give it to them so that they can use it for their food pantry and their food needs for the clients that they work with at Project Home. And so right now, we're still in a holding pattern when it comes to the cupboard, because, campus is technically closed. But I think apart from the physical stuff, as you said, Anne, we did, soon after the pandemic started, decide to do something called community prayer. And this was an idea that Michelle France, our campus minister for spiritual programming, had been doing when she was a campus minister at Notre Dame Academy, which is outside of Philadelphia. I can't remember the exact location. I think it's in Radnor, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I think so too.
And so
somewhere on the main line.
Yeah. And so she brought this tradition of community prayer to Gwynedd, and, pandemic happened and we were trying to think of something. So what can we do now that we're all online? And Michelle said, well, maybe we could try some community prayer. And at that same moment, call it divine inspiration, intervention, whatever, our Jim Gallo reached out to myself and said, hey, Jeff, what do you think about doing a prayer? And, everything came together. Everything conspires towards the good, right? Romans. And so we had our first community prayer back in late March, and that was wildly successful. We had like 40, 50 people sign up. And since then, we've been doing them weekly. Less people, but still a good quality discussion and good reflection. And I think people really benefit from it a whole lot. At least that's my perception of it.
Well, it's not just perception, because I've been involved and I can vouch for these meetings as an alumni and a parent. They do them on Monday mornings at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. And what they do is spend about a half an hour where you'll have a beautiful video with music and prayer from Michelle, and then a group question for all of us about something to do with our faith and helping us to grow during this time of the pandemic. So I know that it's been wonderful for my daughter and I to partake in that. So it's a Zoom call, just like, even though all of you who are listening can't see that we're on a Zoom call right now, we see each other, the three of us here at Patchwork Heart Radio and Sowing Hope podcast. But it's the same kind of thing. It's a nice video call where people can partake in a real prayer meeting. So I think it's just a great thing.
Yeah. And I think it's this time of pandemic, I think, is an opportunity really for a lot of campus ministries, college ministries, and all ministry, because it really is inviting us to consider new ways to connect, new ways to really share faith with one another, and meet people where they are. I think we're fortunate that we do have people who have access to technology who are able to jump on these prayer meetings. Sometimes there are students or people who might not. And so how do we reach out to them? How do we invite them into this, this love of God that we try and preach and live out every day through our own ministries? And so, I really been thinking of this time as a really great opportunity for us to think through some creative ideas and innovative ways to really reach others. Community prayer, again, idea was not mine, but I think it was a very good idea, and we've been doing a pretty good job executing it and getting a lot of good feedback.
It's what a great insight, Jeff, on so many different levels. I think it's long overdue for the church and for higher education, whatever. All these things. I think it's long overdue for the church to begin. Now, let me be crystal clear. I'm not talking about changing our our teachings, our church tradition, you know, the importance of the holy sacrifice of the Mass, you know, all of those things have to remain, you know, the way they are. They're unchanging from the beginning of history. But what I do think is so important that you pointed out is that we have to begin to look at ways that we can take this message of the gospel out, because this is what Jesus told us to do. He said, you know, go make disciples of all nations. And, you know, this part of discipleship, you know, is where are people going? They aren't necessarily going to, you know, supermarkets, and they aren't going to places that they used to go on a regular basis, you know, or maybe they're only going to supermarkets. They're not going to baseball stadiums. They're not going. They're congregating on the internet. That's where we're congregating now, on Snapchat, on Instagram. I mean, that's where people congregate, and we don't think of it like that, or the church hasn't thought of it like that. But now is the time we have to go and make disciples of people who are congregating and interacting socially on the internet. And so how are we going to do that? How are we going to do that?
Yeah, and, you know, great work by St. Pope John Paul II, new evangelization. You know, that phrase, definitely through divinity school, I heard about that a whole lot. New evangelization, new evangelization, new evangelization. It's a lot, and it's great. But I think we're still trying to figure out what exactly that is. And it includes the internet. It includes so many different ways. And you know, perhaps an insight might be that, you know, it goes back to what we've been kind of started this conversation off with, you know, meeting people where they are. There's a wonderful professor at Boston College, Hoffman Ospino, who's one of the foremost Catholic scholars, really doing a lot of work within the Hispanic Latino community. He himself is Colombian, and he also talks a lot about evangelization. And I took a class with him, and we talked a lot about, you know, what is doing ministry in different cultures look like? What does ministry look like doing, working with the Latino culture and the Hispanic culture? What is it when you're working with, you know, cultures of color, African American, other cultures, Asian, just straight African cultures, and I think, you know, we can't necessarily equate that with different kind of subcultures within, you know, teenage ages, different ages, but I do think that a lot can be said, taken from Hoff's work, and really thinking about, you know, how do we show people again that we're open, that we're willing to be there, and we're willing to engage. I think there's a perception, rightly or wrongly, I don't know, but there's certainly a perception that we as a church we do our own thing. Everybody else can kind of do their own thing, and we'll be cool over here. And everybody over here can kind of be
I agree.
themselves. And,
totally
you know,
right.
I think there's definitely times for us as a church to be together and to have our time. But I think when we start to lose sight of the fact that we are operating within a world, it's, you know, for me, I was actually thinking about that before I got on this podcast. I was like, okay, like, what are my thoughts on that? And I was really, I have a good friend of mine. She loves talking about the incarnation. It's like her whole thing. And I was thinking about that, you know, what does that truly mean? That, you know, Christ didn't just come into a world of his desire. Like he created the world, but the world that he came into wasn't perfect at all. It was, in fact, it was very far from perfect. Military occupation, poverty, all this stuff, but still Christ came. Still God was here through Christ. And who are we to say that we shouldn't be invited to do the same and live in that spirit, that evangelical spirit, small evangelical spirit of bringing the good news to others in the world. You know, I'm certainly, Snapchat, Instagram is certainly not one for TikTok. That is not my, but I know, you know, I think these are the things we need to be talking
Yeah.
about. Where is,
Oh, yeah.
what are the boundaries? Are there boundaries? Like what,
Mhm.
in terms of social media, how are we connecting? Who are we connecting with? And what is the best way to do that? I think, yeah, it's all, I like to say, it's like throwing spaghetti on a wall, seeing what sticks.
Yes.
What sticks?
You really have to discover all of that and try it.
I love the image, Jeff, that you said with, I picture it as almost like a fence, where on one side you have all the people of faith and maybe very devoted people. And on the other side, yeah, you have everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can't just preach to our own.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? We can't just preach. We have to show them that we care. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to listen to us if we don't care. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say that again and again on a podcast or a TV show as a person of faith and as a Catholic. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to listen to us if we don't care. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we can open up a book and read it and hand them something. But if we don't care, they won't either. Mm-hmm. You know? Yeah. So I think that's where it begins. That's why I commend you, and I commend also the university there on the way that you're handling that. So thank you so much from me and my family.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for being here and just taking active part in all of it. You know.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, and there you go. There's that last little piece, right? The active part that we have, that we're called to be. You know, I love that part in the Catechism where it says, you know, worship, or, you know, going to church, we're called to full, active, and conscious participation in our faith, and, you know, at the Mass, right? People say full, active, and conscious. You know, I think a lot of times we might be, we might be fully there, like our entire body's in the seat, and, you know, we might even be thinking like, all right, I'm a little bit active, but are we even consciously doing what we're doing? And so let's look at that, and, you know, call people to conscious participation in what we're talking about, which means that it's not just handing them a book and saying, you know what, go figure this out. This is what the teaching in the church is. It's the, as you mentioned earlier, it's the accompaniment. It's the walking with somebody. It's being conscious of what we're doing. And I think when we take a look at how we're able to accompany somebody and be, you know, and look, we can't accompany everybody, you know, we know that, especially being in media, that this touches people's hearts and lives because we get feedback, and whether it's on social media or on email or whatever, we love it. But we also know that we cannot accompany everybody. We can accompany some people, but in order to be fully conscious of what we're doing, we can't possibly do it for everybody. So who is in your circle, right? Who is in your circle? And who is God calling you to consciously walk with, so that they grow deeper in faith, especially during this pandemic. And I think some of those great ideas that you have, through the digital media and what you're doing with your students, the different service trips and all those things are fostering that type of environment. So I certainly commend you for all the great work you're doing, Jeff. It's just wonderful.
Thank you so much. No, I appreciate being on here. And, you know, I think to your point about you can't reach everybody, right? I think there's a lot of truth in that. And what I always come back to, and I think I said this earlier, it's like a broken record. I feel like, I'd listen to this guy. It's going to say the same thing throughout the whole thing. But, you know, I go back to this idea of planting seeds. You know, sometimes an interaction is just 5 minutes. And then maybe in the context of Gwynedd in college and university, like it's 5 minutes and then they're gone, you know, and in that moment, in that particular interaction, what am I planting? What am I inviting the student to consider, and how am I really interacting with them? Is this going to be an interaction that's memorable? Are they going to listen, or are they going to feel like that they were heard? Are they going to feel like that they were validated? And am I going to, you know, are they, in those questions again from that study, is he going to remember my name? Will it even matter to this person that I'm gone?
Praise God.
To go back to you, Anne, showing that care, showing that, hey, we're here. we want to be here with you. This is the least we can do. I think that in some ways that's all we can do. But yeah, it's planting seeds and not knowing their future promise, but hoping for the best.
I have to bring up a quick name from the way, way, way past, because when I came to Gwynedd-Mercy University way back in the mid to late 80s, Sister Mary Norbert, and she's long passed away, at least I think probably 15 or 20 years maybe by now, but she made an impact on me as a Sister of Mercy. She was the first person that I met when I came to the university as a transfer student. And I'm so grateful because I felt that mercy. And I did have an interaction with her from the time, I started until the time I graduated. Maybe it wasn't all the time, but it still stays with me. I still remember that years later when she had one of her jubilees or whatever it was, I couldn't make it. And she wrote this beautiful card to me in the mail saying that she remembered me and wishing me well with my 2 daughters. And it was just so lovely. So I remember her, and I remember the secretary there, Josie. I don't know if you remember Josie, but she worked in the business department there at Gwynedd-Mercy. So I remember a lot of people there. Wonderful. I mean, I could list all the names, but they're just some of them. Yeah. But I'm very grateful to you, Jeff, and to everyone there. And just for you taking the time to be with us on this podcast. And I would hope that you would come back again because we have so much to talk about.
Sure. Hey, I'm available. I appreciate you guys inviting me. And I'm, especially now, even though I work during the day, I have an abundance of time. I do.
You're spending time with Daniel too.
Yeah. Yes. It's a lot sometimes. That's okay. I mean, he's worth it. So yeah, I mean, this has been really fun. I've enjoyed the conversation. I've enjoyed your openness and what you've contributed and let me know.
Awesome. Absolutely. Hey, Jeff, before you go, though, we just want to make sure, any students or any prospective students that might be out there listening to something like this and are certainly probably encouraged by what you're talking about. I certainly am. So how would they get in touch with you, get in touch with the university if they're coming out to shadow a day at Gwynedd-Mercy and they want to connect with you? How would they do that?
Wow. Okay, great. So a lot of different ways. You can always navigate on your web browser, as Anne said, www.gmercyu.edu. That's our homepage. Gives you everything about the university. You can find campus ministry on the banner under history and tradition. You can reach out to us through social media on Facebook. We're on Facebook, we're at Gwynedd-Mercy University Campus Ministry. On Instagram, we're at gmercyu ministry. You can follow us there. I've become a very deep content head recently, so I'm just putting content up there. You can see what we're doing. I think Anne might have my email. I don't know about giving emails out over the airwaves.
Right.
Feel free to reach out. I mean, my email is on the website. You can feel free to reach out to me there.
Well, they can reach out to us if you have questions. We're at the Sowing Hope podcast at patchworkheart.org.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Is it just Sowing Hope?
Just Sowing Hope. Just Sowing Hope.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No,
I got it wrong.
Yeah, no, it's
Sowing
all good.
Hope at patchworkheart.org. But remember, sowing is spelled SEWING.
That's right.
Yep.
Sowing Hope at patchworkheart.org.
Yep, and of course, we're always happy to connect you with any of our guests. Jeff or any of our guests. If you email us there, we're happy to get in touch with them. So, Jeff, really, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Can't wait to have you back on and talk with you further. Best of luck during these COVID times, and leading ministry through them is difficult. So, thank you.
Yes, I thank you, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, and just a shout out to the Betsy and Michelle, who I work with, and Jim. Also shout out to Chelsea and Daniel. I don't know if they're listening, and also to my parents, my dad, Semi Anastasia. I don't know if they're listening. I don't know who's listening, but shout out to all of them. And just, it's been fun. Thank you.
He's doing
Thank
a
you so
great
much.
job.
Yes, he is.
I have to say.
Thank you.
And Jeff, feel free to share this podcast because we would love for other people to hear your great message.
Sure.
And
Thank you so much.
Awesome Gwynedd-Mercy University.
Yeah.
Of course.
Great place.
Well, folks, the hour always flies, no matter how fast, or no matter how much time you think an hour is, it always flies by. But thanks so much for spending it with us on the Sowing Hope podcast. And next Tuesday at 9:00 a.m. Eastern, we'll be back with you and be able to inspire you and talk with you and sow hope into your hearts. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'd like to remind you all to head over to tomorrow night to head over to Fiat Ministry Network and also this same YouTube channel to check out Anne's new show Journeys in Faith, which it will be at 8:00 p.m.
8:30.
I'm sorry, 8:30 p.m. tomorrow night. So please head over, subscribe to this page. You'll get a notification that we're live again. Anne's going to have a great show tomorrow, and it's going to be the first of an awesome show. So thank you everybody for tuning in today, and Anne, thank you for co-hosting as always. And
thank you.
Of course. Until next time, from all of us here at Patchwork Heart Ministry, for Anne DeSantis, for Jeff Wallace, I'm Bill Snyder. Keep beating to your Catholic heart and sowing hope into broken hearts. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sowing Hope on Patchwork Heart Radio. For more information about this podcast and our ministries, visit our websites, patchworkheart.org and andesantis.com. You can also follow and interact with us on Twitter at PWH Ministry or Anne DeSantis 2.
Hey everyone, it's Anne DeSantis here to tell you about my new online TV show called Journeys in Faith. Thanks to Fiat Ministry Network and Patchwork Heart Radio, I'll be interviewing some amazing guests who'll share with all of us their journeys in faith. It's going to be great, and I can't wait for you to be introduced to some truly good people who are working hard to bring deeper faith to others. It's all about relationship with God and living out our mission as intentional disciples. Join me on Fridays Eastern Time for Journeys in Faith, 8:30 to 9:30. Subscribe at Fiat Ministry Network and Patchwork Heart Ministry on both Facebook and YouTube. I'll see you Friday and have a great week. God bless.
Patchwork Heart Ministry and Fiat Ministry Network invite you to discover your mission. A brand new in-depth monthly video series featuring engaging Catholic speakers who will challenge you to live your life abundantly. For only $25 a month, you will receive a personal monthly mission, including 3 full-length inspirational talks that build upon a new theme each month. Sign up for the Discover Your Mission tier at patreon.com/patchworkheartministry today.